LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the October 31st edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me. Happy Halloween for those who celebrate, I guess. Today I'll be showing you the 13 best, most newsworthy clips I picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States, for what should be really informative, educational, fair use, media criticism, and political commentary show for you all today. My main topic, as you can see from the video title, is Republicans' conspiracy theories revealed, or danger of Republican conspiracy theories revealed right before midterms, and this will mainly be a discussion of the attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and what it means regarding the increasing threat of political violence as the midterms approach. But before I get to the main news clips, I wanted to show you this Saturday Night Live parody of one of the big proponents of 2020 election conspiracy theories, this Arizona governor candidate, Kari Lake, parodied by one of my Saturday Night Live favorites, Cecily Strong. And for my regular viewers, you've seen this stock answer from the real Kari Lake the last couple weeks, where she attacks her interviewer for even asking her about her election denialism. And I love the way Saturday Night Live took off on that in the clip I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Now, one of your main campaign issues is the denial of the 2020 election.
Can you media types just get over the one thing I've made the center of my campaign for months and months? Arizonans want to talk about the issues that affect them, like crime in New York or crime in Detroit. And the most pressing issue, drag queen story time. Men dressing as loud, sassy women, introducing children to the joys of reading. Not on my watch.
Now, Ms. Lake, you have proposed some big changes to local voting laws. If you become governor, do you promise to make sure everyone's vote counts?
Judy, I'll make it easy. If the people of Arizona elect me, I'll make sure they never have to vote ever again.
Now, some people are saying that kind of election denialism contributes to violence.
Violent? What do you mean? Like crazy-eyed men in tactical gear waving assault rifles next to ballot boxes? That's just Arizona, baby. Look, nothing I say can be incendiary because I say it in TV voice. So jump on into Kari Lake, Arizona, because it's placid and serene on top, but underneath, it's a whole lot of giardia.
Yeah, that's jump on into Kari Lake if that's what you're looking for, I guess. And by the way, as usual, if you look down in the video description, I've not only put brief summaries of all 13 of the clips I'm using, but down under sources, you can see the where I've taken the videos from. Most of the time, you can see the entire video, like the entire Saturday Night Live cold open that includes Cecily Strong as Kari Lake and Kenan Thompson as Herschel Walker, and what's that guy's name who played Mehmet Oz, the senatorial candidate in Pennsylvania, the guy who always plays Don Jr. I can't, whatever. It'll come to me eventually. But anyway, I thought that was a great parody of some of the clips you've seen in my past couple live streams, where Kari Lake is like attacking the interviewer for asking her about this 2020 election denialism that she made a centerpiece of her campaign, at least in the primaries. And I like that part at the end where she also talks about how, I will take away from all Arizonans the need to vote ever again, because that's what's going to happen. That's the end of our democracy that apparently is on the ballot in the midterms. So I am going to get to the newsmaker clips, especially covering the attack on Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, and what it says about the increased threat of political violence in our current United States political system. But one other political comedy clip I had to show you former President Barack Obama was back on the stump, back in the rallies, trying to get drum up support from Democrats in the midterms. And I had to show you, it was so great seeing Barack Obama speaking again. He's so much better than any of the political figures we have in the post-Obama era. And here he is talking about the qualifications of Herschel Walker to be a senator. And I thought this was awesome. This is back on a few days ago, October 28th in Georgia. I apologize. The Fox 5 Atlanta live stream I took this from had kind of a low-quality video. You can't even really see Barack Obama till the end, but it's worth the wait. It's worth the wait because this is a great clip that I'll talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Some of you may not remember, but Herschel Walker was a heck of a football player. I mean, some of you are too young to remember, but in college he was amazing. One of the best running backs of all time. But here's the question. Does that make him the best person to represent you in the U.S.? Does that make him equipped to weigh in on the critical decisions about our economy and our foreign policy and our future? Let's do a thought experiment. Let's say you're at the airport and you see Mr. Walker and you say, hey, there's Herschel Walker, Heisman winner. Let's have him fly the plane. You probably wouldn't say that. You'd want to know, does he know how to fly an airplane? Or let's say you go to the hospital and you say, you know, that Walker guy, he sure could tear it up at Sanford Stadium. Give him a scalpel. No, you wouldn't say that. You'd ask, at least I would, has he done surgery before? And by the way, the opposite is true too. Like, you may have liked me as president, but you would not want me starting a tailback for the dogs. I mean, can you imagine my slow, old, skinny behind getting hit by some 300-pound defensive tackle who runs a 4.6 40? You'd have to scrape me off the field. No, I can't.
I like where that ended because it was like the opposite of the old "Si se puede," yes we can. No, I can't. No, I can't. I cannot be a football player in the mode of Herschel Walker, but Herschel Walker, the football player, cannot be a senator in the mode of Raphael Warnock. So if you know, just because he's a famous football player doesn't mean you want him to fly the plane or do your surgery. You might want to know about his qualifications. So kudos to Barack Obama for, I'm sorry about the low quality of that video, but I found that reminds me of the old days when the Democratic Party had such an amazing advocate. Barack Obama was like a once-in-a-generation leader, and I don't know who's going to be the next one. Is it going to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? She's almost old enough to be president. Maybe she'll be the next generation. I guess we'll see. But anyway, now I'm going to get to the 5 news summaries from the big 5 corporate outlets. They all pretty much covered the same in slightly different ways. They covered the same attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, and the increasing threat of political violence as midterms approach. That's basically the news summary from all of the big 5 corporate outlets. And the longest, I'm going to show you from longest to shortest. The longest one was NBC News Meet the Press. Chuck Todd talking about this issue, and I will talk about Chuck Todd's summary a little more after we watch that longest. Is it the best news summary? I'm not sure it's the best, but it's the longest news summary from NBC News Meet the Press yesterday together over here.
Sunday morning, Friday was yet another reminder that these are not ordinary times. Consider we're just 9 days away from the first national election since the attack on the U.S. Capitol. And obviously the threat of violence hasn't ebbed. The chilling and violent attack on Paul Pelosi, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's 82-year-old husband, is raising fears of more political violence. Pelosi's husband had surgery for a skull fracture and is recovering after being beaten by a man with a hammer who broke into their home in San Francisco. Speaker Pelosi was the target, but was in Washington at the time with her security detail. There was no security detail at the House. Both President Biden and former President Obama addressed the assault.
It's one thing to condemn the violence, but you can't condemn the violence unless you condemn those people who continue to argue the election was not real, that it's being stolen, that all the malarkey that's being put out there to undermine democracy. Talk has to stop. That's the problem.
A politics where some in office or who aspire to office work to stir up division, to make folks as angry and as afraid of one another for their own advantage. And all of this has been amped up, hyped up, 24/7 on social media, on platforms that oftentimes find controversy and conflict more profitable than telling the truth.
Donald Trump has yet to make any statement about the attack. The House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy did denounce the violence. Targeted violence is not new in American politics. Our country has a long history of it. 11 U.S. presidents have been direct targets of assassins. 4 of them were killed. Many others have been the objects of assassination plots. Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot in 2011. Republican Whip Steve Scalise was shot in 2017. Both almost died. But since former President Trump's election in 2016, the number of recorded threats against members of Congress has increased by 967%. That is not a typo, folks, to more than 9,600 last year. A month ago, Republican Senator Susan Collins warned of the surge in threats, telling the New York Times this: "I wouldn't be surprised if a senator or a House member were killed." And the recent record speaks for itself. In June, a man was arrested with a gun near Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh's home after saying he planned to kill Kavanaugh and himself. In July, a man was charged with felony stalking after threatening to kill Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. The same month, Lee Zeldin, the Republican nominee for governor of New York, was attacked on stage at a campaign event. In August, a man was sentenced after threatening to kill Dr. Fauci and his family. Also in August, a pro-Trump armed man wearing body armor tried to breach the FBI's Cincinnati field office in the days after they executed a search at Mar-a-Lago. In September, a Texas woman was charged after making death threats against U.S. District Judge Aileen Cannon. She's the judge overseeing the Mar-a-Lago document fight. And on Friday, a man pled guilty to threatening to kill Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell and 3 members of his staff. All of this adds up to a chilling timeline of recent political violence. And none of these incidents, none of them, are even directly related to January 6th. That's where more than 880 people have been federally charged in the Capitol insurrection so far, including a man this week who was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison for dragging police officer Michael Fanone into that angry pro-Trump crowd where he was brutally assaulted. And yet, there is little evidence some on the right have tempered their rhetoric. And Pelosi herself has often been a target.
He must go. He is a clear and present danger to the nation that we all love.
I'm going to Washington to stop the Pelosi agenda, and you're not going to silence me.
Biden, Pelosi, and other communist Democrats hate America, hate God, and hate our way of life.
We're going to end crazy Nancy Pelosi, and she's nuts. She's crazy. We're going to end her political career. Her political career is going to be ended once and for all.
Before Friday's assault occurred, the suspect, David DePepe, confronted Mr. Pelosi, shouting, "Where is Nancy? Where are you, Nancy?" Those were words that were eerily similar to these on January 6th.
Where are you, Nancy? We're looking for you. She's in jail. Nancy. Oh, Nancy. Nancy. Where are you, Nancy?
Let's get the latest on where this investigation stands. I'm joined now by our investigator.
So you see there from the NBC News Meet the Press news summary, they talk both about, I mean, in some ways that was the best news summary in terms of context for this attack on Paul Pelosi that happened last Friday, because they talked about how Nancy Pelosi's been demonized, and they also showed some clips from the January 6th attack on the Capitol where that like weird dude was saying like, oh Nancy, where are you? I mean, it almost sounds like some like high school bully. I don't even know who that dude was, but there was a lot of chants of where's Nancy at the January 6th attack that have now been brought back to our attention because of this attack on Paul Pelosi. You know, there's been some updates since the Sunday shows where this guy was saying he wanted to like tie up or get Nancy Pelosi to either admit the truth or have her kneecaps broken, and there's like all sorts of weird, but this dude really was an election conspiracy theorist, and that's something important to remember as we get to the Fox News Sunday news summary. That's the news summary after the Face the Nation one. But I thought Meet the Press did the best job of showing how Nancy Pelosi has been demonized, although not even enough, because like 2 decades at least, Nancy Pelosi has been demonized by Republicans in some of the most vile ways that you can think of, and the fact that she got attacked by some deranged guy, I don't know. Well, we'll talk about whether he's deranged or not later, but and I'm going to show you the Fox News Sunday version of this and how it should have been cross-examined. When I'm going to show you from this morning's MSNBC Morning Joe. That's like clips 8 and 9 that are coming up, but because you can see the summaries of the clips I'm going to show you down in the video description. But that was just the first of the news summaries. Here's how CBS News Face the Nation summarized pretty much the same information in a pretty similar way over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. Last week was an extremely troubling one in American politics. We now have just 8 days left until Election Day, and the country is feeling deeply unsettled. Our CBS News Battleground Tracker poll out this morning shows that a stunning 79%, that's nearly 8 in 10 likely voters, say that the country is out of control. That's an ominous sign for the Democrats who hold power in Washington. Of those 79% expected to vote next Tuesday, Republicans have a more than 20-point advantage. 2 issues, the health of the economy and the health of American democracy, have taken center stage in this campaign, and it is the latter subject and the political rhetoric that could help fuel violence that is under fresh scrutiny following Friday's attack on Paul Pelosi, the 82-year-old husband of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, at their home in San Francisco. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has more.
The day after the horrific attack, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi expressed gratitude for law enforcement and her husband's medical team and said she and her family were heartbroken and traumatized by the life-threatening attack. President Biden spoke with the Pelosis on Saturday.
I don't know for certain, but it looks like this was intended for Nancy. We kept asking, where's Nancy? Where's Nancy?
42-year-old David DePepe will face a series of felony charges in the coming days, including attempted homicide, accused of striking the 82-year-old Pelosi in the head multiple times with a hammer. DePepe's social media posts are saturated with conspiracy theories, Holocaust denial, and claims of election fraud. Democrats argue Republicans must do more to denounce the violence and end the baseless claims that could fuel threats.
That's the problem. We can't just say, I feel badly about the violence. We condemn it. condemn what produces the violence. And this talk produces the violence.
The attack on Paul Pelosi is the latest in a growing wave of threats and plots against elected officials. Capitol Police records obtained by CBS News show nearly 10,000 investigations into threats on members of Congress last year. Georgia Democratic Senator Raphael Warnock has spent heavily on security this election cycle. Our Nicole Killian caught up with him on the campaign trail.
And I'm not naive about the tough moment we're in. And there are people who are trying to stir that up for short-term political gain. It's dangerous stuff.
Meanwhile, an intelligence bulletin obtained by CBS News warns of a heightened threat from domestic extremist groups on and after Election Day. Not just possible targeting of elected officials, but of elections administrators, political rallies, and of possible attempts to intimidate voters or use claims of fraud to justify violence after the election, especially in cases where it takes additional time to certify the results.
Despite baseless claims of fraud, the 2020 election is considered the most secure and successful in U.S. history, and voting so far in 2022 has been safe and secure. So far, more than 20 million people have voted early, and elections officials say they're being vigilant and coordinating with police, emphasizing everyone should feel safe coming out to vote. Margaret?
Scott MacFarlane, thank you.
And I actually follow Scott MacFarlane on Twitter. He covers a lot of the trials of the January 6th defendants, and that was another good journalistic news summary of this, midterms approaching, threats of political violence increasing, attack on Paul Pelosi as a symptom of the election denialism. Not quite the same in this next news summary from Fox News Sunday. It's Shannon Bream and Lucas Tomlinson, where they try to downplay the responsibility of Republicans, and this will become even more apparent when I show how Shannon Bream does this faux cross-examination of Republican National Committee Chair Ronna McDaniel in clip 8. But this is clip 4, the Fox News Sunday news summary, and all the rest of the news summaries come from journalistic outlets. Fox News, of course, is not a journalistic outlet. If you want to read this book, Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman, you can see how Fox News was actually created as the propaganda outlet of the Republican Party by Roger Ailes, and it's definitely fulfilling that function. I watched the American Newsroom this morning, the first straight news program on Fox News, and it wasn't until 52 minutes into the 2-hour program they even reported on the attack on Paul Pelosi, and they definitely downplayed it, kind of like they downplay it in the news summary from Shannon Bream and Lucas Tomlinson, reporting from Delaware, maybe Delaware. I'll talk about it a little more after we watch that news summary together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. Big-name Republicans and Democrats are swarming the campaign trail this weekend, selling their vision to voters. Democrats trying to shore up control of the House, trying to prevent it from flipping red. And the heat is on in the battle over a 50-50 Senate. Both parties on edge as races in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Arizona all appear to be a jump ball. All of this against the backdrop of a frightening scene in San Francisco. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband violently attacked in their home. Political leaders quickly condemned the attack, and Americans find themselves reminded once again that lawmakers and U.S. leaders on both sides of the aisle face increased threats of violence. We've got a lot to discuss this morning. We will break it all down for you with our bipartisan pollster panel, Celinda Lake and Kellyanne Conway. And in just a few minutes, we'll speak with RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel and then Democratic Senator Chris Coons, a close confidant of President Biden. But we begin in team coverage. Rich Edson is live in Pennsylvania's capital, where a Senate race is coming down to the wire. But first, to Lucas Tomlinson at the White House with the president's reaction to the attack inside the home of Speaker of the House. Lucas.
Shannon, officials say if not for an alert 911 dispatcher and quick police response, this attack could have had a much different outcome.
This is despicable.
President Biden speaking in Philadelphia hours after the attack.
There's too much violence, political violence.
Too much hatred. Too much vitriol.
Police say the suspect, 42-year-old David DePepe, broke into the Pelosi home in San Francisco around 2:30 early Friday morning. Nancy Pelosi's husband, 82-year-old Paul Pelosi, called 911 from the bathroom moments after the break-in. The attacker calling out, "Where's Nancy?" When police arrived, they found Pelosi and the assailant struggling over a hammer. Police say DePepe was able to gain control of it and strike Paul Pelosi in the head before being tackled by the police. Paul Pelosi had successful surgery for a fractured skull. He also suffered injuries to his hand and right arm. He's expected to make a full recovery. The latest violence comes almost 5 months after a man attempted to assassinate Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. U.S. Capitol Police say threats against lawmakers have more than doubled since 2017. On the campaign trail, former President Barack Obama condemned the attack.
If our rhetoric about each other gets that mean, when we don't just disagree with people, but we start demonizing them, making wild, crazy allegations about them, that creates a dangerous climate.
San Francisco's police chief credited the dispatcher for her quick thinking.
Her actions, in my opinion, resulted in both a higher priority dispatch and a faster police response. I think this was life-saving.
DePepe will make his first court appearance Tuesday. He faces multiple charges, including attempted murder. Shannon?
Lucas Tomlinson from the White House. Lucas, thank you. We now go live to Rich Edson, who is on the campaign trail in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. One to watch, Rich.
I'm not going to show you that report, but do you notice there how Fox News Sunday, they like slipped in the assassination attempt on Brett Kavanaugh? Well, remember the dude who was going to assassinate Brett Kavanaugh, he like took a cab to Brett Kavanaugh's neighborhood and then like called the police and turned himself in, like nobody got hurt. And that was like run all day, every day on Fox News for like weeks as the top story. And not only that, you know what was another like top story run for at least a week on Fox News Sunday, like a month ago? It was when Nancy Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi, got a DUI. That was like a huge story on Fox News. Like every hour they would report it over and over again. But this morning I watched America's Newsroom, and it was like 52 minutes into the 2-hour program that they finally mentioned the attack on Paul Pelosi. And they spent so much time trying to say, oh, this is all about political violence on both sides. And you saw Shannon Bream in that a report in like the first 30 seconds or a minute was like, it's about both sides. It's about both sides. It's not about the, hugely violent rhetoric on the Republican side that totally outweighs anything on the Democratic side. No, Fox News tries to make it, huge both-sidism. So, and this is going to be even more emphasized when I get to clip 8, where Shannon Bream does a really bad job of cross-examining the head of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. But I'll get to that when I get to that, after the news summaries. And I've shown you 3. I have 2 more news summaries. The last 2 are both pretty journalistic. They cover the issues. And you notice in Fox News Sunday, they never showed you the clip of Biden saying, this is the result of election denialism. And they never showed you, they didn't make the connection between this guy going into Nancy Pelosi's house screaming, "Where's Nancy?" and the January 6th rioters like, "Nancy, Nancy, where are you, Nancy?" Most of the other news summaries made that connection, not Fox News Sunday, of course. And here's ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz even made that connection over here.
Good morning and welcome to This Week. 9 days until Election Day. All indications this midterm will draw record turnout and be among the most consequential in a generation. And this morning, our brand new ABC News poll with Ipsos finds a clear issue driving voters: the economy. Half the country says economic concerns and inflation are driving their votes this fall. I've spent the last week traveling out west, exploring the races that could define the control of Congress and, by extension, the future of Joe Biden's presidency. America remains bitterly divided, and this week we saw the horror that officials have warned political polarization could fuel. The 82-year-old husband of Nancy Pelosi viciously attacked in the middle of the night at the couple's home in San Francisco by a suspect police say was in search of the speaker herself, drawing haunting comparisons to those who hunted for her on January 6th. We will break down our new poll and take you across the country in a moment, but we begin with new details this morning on the horrific assault on Paul Pelosi and the threat level around the midterms. Here's Pierre Thomas.
It's an apparent example of political extremism law enforcement has been warning about for years. A man seen heading toward Nancy Pelosi's San Francisco home just before 2:30 a.m. Friday. Police say the suspect breaks in, encountering Pelosi's husband Paul, demanding to see the speaker, using words eerily similar to the chants made by the mob during the January 6th insurrection. Paul Pelosi makes his way to the bathroom and covertly calls police, the suspect using a hammer striking Paul Pelosi twice.
Everybody should be disgusted about what happened this morning.
The evidence mounting that the suspect was there to harm the Speaker of the House.
This was not a random act. This was intentional.
The FBI is dissecting the life of 42-year-old David DePape. Authorities are locking in on social media posts that they believe are his. Those posts portray a man obsessed with conspiracy theories, like COVID-19 vaccines kill, and the big lie that Joe Biden lost the 2020 election. DePape has been charged with a number of state offenses, including attempted murder, and the Justice Department is weighing whether to charge him federally.
Sources tell me the suspect may be the poster boy for so-called lone wolves, sometimes mentally unstable, angry, and willing to take violent action, including against politicians, Martha.
So, Pierre, what is the threat level as...
So, yeah, that was the fourth of the 5 news summaries, also journalistic compared to the Fox News Sunday one that I criticized. And then the shortest of the news summaries is from Dana Bash at CNN's State of the Union, right before her interview of Rick Scott. And I will have a clip of her interview of Rick Scott, which... was a pretty good cross-examination, not the cross-examination of the week. That's the clip 10, the cross-examination of Representative Tom Emmer from Margaret Brennan on CBS News' Face the Nation. But first, let's watch the last news summary, clip 7, CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash, covering these same issues in the most succinct way, but certainly more journalistically than Fox News did over here.
Hello, I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is counting the hours until the votes are counted. We are 9 days out from the midterm elections, and all the close races keep getting closer as Republicans grow more confident about their position and Democrats worry even about races they have not lost in years. This weekend, the man Democrats believe is their best messenger, former President Barack Obama, rallied voters in key battleground states, trying to jolt turnout and counter Republican attacks over the economy, as poll after poll shows voters' chief concern is inflation. But hanging over the political world this weekend is the shocking attack of the husband of the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. Last night, Pelosi said her husband, Paul, continues to improve after a man broke into their San Francisco home shouting, "Where is Nancy?" and beat him with a hammer. A horrible attack that Pelosi said left her family, quote, heartbroken and traumatized, and prompted her fellow lawmakers to voice concern about their own safety and those of their family. Well, here with me now to talk about all of the latest, with just, again, 9 days to go until Election Day, Republican Senator Rick Scott.
And I will have a clip of Republican Senator Rick Scott responding to questioning from Dana Bash, which is a pretty good cross-examination. That's clip 11. But before I show that, I want to show you first a really bad cross-examination from Shannon Bream of the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel. And then I'll show you a clip from this morning's Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski, and then way too early host Jonathan Lemire, both MSNBC hosts, show how Ronna McDaniel should have been cross-examined. And then I'm going to show you the best cross-examination of the week. Margaret Brennan over on CBS News' Face the Nation cross-examined Representative Tom Emmer, the Republican, about his tweet where he was firing a gun and with like hashtag fire Pelosi, and whether that's like incendiary rhetoric. But that's the third clip. I'm going to get to the first of the three I just described. This is one of the worst cross-examinations of the week. This is Shannon Bream, the partisan political hack who now hosts Fox News Sunday, talking to the chair of the Republican National Committee, Ronna McDaniel, who, I mean, if you want to know why she's a political hack, at the request of Donald Trump, she dropped her middle maiden name. She used to be Ronna Romney McDaniel, but because Mitt Romney was not sufficiently subservient to Donald Trump, she dropped her Romney. So that's why she's Ronna McDaniel, and she does not get well cross-examined by Shannon Bream in the clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
I want to start with the attack on Paul Pelosi. It's getting all the headlines this weekend. He's recovering from surgery, expected to do well, have a full recovery. But the Washington Post wasting no time writing this. For many Democrats, the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband represents the all but inevitable conclusion of Republicans' increasingly violent and threatening rhetoric toward their political opponents. Still a lot we don't know about this case, but what do you make of that accusation?
Well, I think that's unfair. I think this is a deranged individual. You can't say people saying, let's fire Pelosi or let's take back the House is saying go do violence. It's just unfair. And I think we all need to recognize violence is up across the board. Lee Zeldin was attacked. We had an assassination attempt against Brett Kavanaugh. And Democrats didn't repudiate that. Joe Biden didn't talk about the assassination attempt against Brett Kavanaugh. But I think the other thing to remember is if this weren't Paul Pelosi, this criminal would probably be out on the street tomorrow. We saw Lee Zeldin's attacker was on the street right after he attacked him. This is what Democrat policies are bringing. But of course, we wish Paul Pelosi a recovery. We don't like this at all. Across the board, we don't want to see attacks on any politician from any political background.
As President Obama, we played a little bit earlier, said everybody needs to take down the language a little bit, the rhetoric, and try to disagree on policy ideas, but not to demonize each other. Okay, let's talk about where we are in the midterms. These were the headlines at the beginning of the year.
And she moves on to the midterms. No real cross-examination. Did a huge amount of both sidism there. Like Obama says we have to lower the political rhetoric, or like that was totally ridiculous. And normally at this point I would explain all the deficiencies in Shannon Bream's cross-examination of Ronna McDaniel, but I noticed this morning that on MSNBC's Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski and then Jonathan Lemire did some really good fact-checking on that clip you just saw, and I can't really do much better than this, so I will show you that clip and talk about it a little more after we watch it together over here.
See, that's what they do. And they go to places where people will just nod approvingly at what they say, even when they're lying and deflecting. The first thing you'll hear that Ronna said was, oh, look. This is a deranged individual, kind of insinuating that it's just isolated and these crazy lefties are trying to connect everything. They're evil. No, Ronna. This deranged individual got ideas from websites. He brought zip ties and he said, where's Nancy? And you have to literally be willfully ignorant to avoid that fact and just kind of condescendingly say, this is a deranged person. Yeah, come on, guys. And crime is up. I mean, my God. Did you see how much crime was up? That's what this is about. It's just random crime, even happening in San Francisco at the home of Nancy Pelosi. It's insulting. But beyond that, she lies. And she makes a parallel that is completely nonsensical.
Yeah, it is. It's about whataboutism and mistruths.
Yeah.
Just there. A few fact checks here. First of all, the Steve Scalise shooting. All Democrats condemned when that happened at the congressional baseball practice. Joe Biden and Democrats did condemn the violent rhetoric and the attempt to threaten Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh. She mentioned Lee Zeldin. There are two incidents. One, a man got up on stage who was drunk, strode near Zeldin. Later the next day, he said he didn't even know who Zeldin was. That was not a targeted attack. The Zeldin campaign also has tried to make much of a shooting that happened down the street from the Zeldin house. Again, had nothing to do with Zeldin. And there are very few Republicans, Michael Steele, who are stepping into the breach here and unequivocally condemning what happened. Mitch McConnell did. We'll give him credit for that, I suppose. Kevin McCarthy has spoken about it just a little, he's sending his well wishes to Nancy Pelosi. Not a word from Donald Trump. What possibly can change here?
Not a word from Donald Trump. As far as I have been able to see, Donald Trump has not in any way condemned this. And Donald Trump, of course, is the titular head of the Republican Party. No condemnation of the attack on Paul Pelosi after his many years of demonizing Nancy Pelosi, and not just Donald Trump, as you saw briefly summarized on NBC News' Meet the Press. Nancy Pelosi has been demonized for decades by, going all the way back to Newt Gingrich in the 90s. They've been demonizing Nancy Pelosi, and now they're, reaping what they sowed. That's in my opinion. But anyway, I think Mika Brzezinski and especially Jonathan Lemire showed how Ronna McDaniel should have been cross-examined by Shannon Bream on Fox News Sunday if she weren't a partisan hack, which of course she is. And the next clip I want to show you is actually the cross-examination of the week. Margaret Brennan over on CBS News' Face the Nation had Republican Representative Tom Emmer on talked about how he put out this tweet of how he's exercising his Second Amendment rights, shooting a gun with #Fire Pelosi. And, why are you firing a gun and not showing a pink slip if you want to fire Pelosi in a non-violent way? And kudos to Margaret Brennan for the cross-examination of the week over in this clip.
I want to ask you about this when it comes to political violence. On your Twitter feed, you posted this video we're going to show just a few days ago where you're firing a gun and it says, "Enjoyed exercising my Second Amendment rights, #Fire Pelosi." Why is there a gun in a political ad at all?
It wasn't an ad.
Hashtag
I was
or a
tweeting
tweet.
out. I was tweeting out something that I had just
#Fire
done.
Pelosi with a weapon.
Well, now
wouldn't a pink slip be more fitting if it's about firing her?
It's interesting, Margaret.
Why a gun?
It's interesting, Margaret, that we're talking about this morning. When a couple of years back, when a Bernie Sanders supporter shot Steve Scalise,
Which was horrendous
when a Bernie
and
Sanders
horrific,
supporter
which is
shot
why we
Steve
should be
Scalise,
not
I never heard
putting
you or
weapons.
anyone else in the media trying to blame Democrats for what happened. We need to stay focused on what we're all doing.
We did extensive coverage of what happened to Steve Scalise. There's extensive
Nobody
news coverage,
tried
sir.
to equate Democrats' rhetoric. People that
I'm not talking about your rhetoric. I'm talking about what you posted. You're shooting a gun. Our viewers just saw it.
Yeah, right.
#Fire Pelosi.
Exercising our Second Amendment rights, having
That's
fun,
not a debate about the
shooting a
Second
gun.
Amendment.
Yeah.
That's not a debate about the Second Amendment.
Yes, it is.
#Fire Pelosi.
Yes, it is. I'm
Do you
running
not
the campaign
understand that that is
operation for the
suggestive to people who are in a bad state and in this current environment, how risky it is? As you're talking about the importance of lowering the rhetoric.
I disagree with you,
Why do you leave
Margaret.
that up?
Again, I never saw anyone after Steve Scalise was shot by a
I'm
Bernie
talking about
Sanders
right
supporter
now,
trying
what
to
just is happening
equate Democrat rhetoric with those actions. Please don't do that.
Okay, looking at your candidates, Republican candidates have spent more than $116 million on ads that mention Speaker Pelosi by name in this cycle. if this is about the issues, why don't you make it about the issues? Why not depersonalize it?
It is absolutely about the issues. It's about the fact that we have double-digit inflation, exploding cost of living. We've got a crime wave across this country that is the direct result.
In this moment, we are 8 days out. Don't you think this needs to change? Why not pull some of these ads? Why not just delete your tweet?
I'm sure people like to talk about anything but what the Democrats have done to this country, which, quite frankly, is exploding cost of living, a crime wave in our major cities that is the result of this defund the police nonsense and cashless bail. I mean, you look at New York City, where you put someone in jail at 9 p.m. for assaulting someone on the street, and they're back out on the street at 9 a.m. committing crimes again. You look at my state of Minnesota. Minneapolis has 6,000 assaults since the beginning of the year, Margaret. Those are the issues that are top of mind for every voter in this country. That's why they're going to show up on November 8th, and that's why Republicans are going to win in the midterms.
That's what our projections are showing. But I would suggest more pink slips, fewer weapons in our ads in this environment. Sir, thank you for joining us.
More pink slips, fewer weapons. After Margaret Brennan agrees with Tom Emmer, who's the chair of the National Republican Congressional Committee. So he's in charge of getting Republicans elected to the House of Representatives, taking over the House, which apparently they have like a 80% chance of doing on November 8th, although I'm going to show a couple clips at the end that might give you a little bit of hope that the Republicans aren't going to take the House and especially won't take the Senate, and I'll talk about that when I get to those clips, but that was definitely the cross-examination of the week. Kudos to Margaret Brennan for really putting it to Tom Emmer there, the Republican, about his hashtag Fire Pelosi tweet that included him firing a gun. That is like way too violent. And then before I finish with this topic, I have one more clip. This is Dana Bash doing an okay job of cross-examining. I mean, not as good as Margaret Brennan's cross-examination of the week, but this is CNN's Dana Bash cross-examining Republican Senator Rick Scott about whether election denialism should be held in some way responsible for this attack on Nancy Pelosi that was kind of based on election denialism. Since the Sunday morning news analysis shows, the police have come out with some information about how this dude who attacked Paul Pelosi wanted to tie up Nancy Pelosi and get her to tell the truth about what really happened in the 2020 election and break her kneecaps if she wouldn't tell the truth that he got from all these conspiracy theory sites, which is what makes it so ridiculous and disturbing. But anyway, here is Rick Scott continuing the election denialism, which Dana Bash does a pretty good job of pointing out in her cross-examination of Senator Rick Scott in this clip.
Let's start with the attack on Pelosi's husband, Paul Pelosi. What is your reaction?
It's disgusting. This violence is horrible. That's happened. We had a door knocker in Florida that was attacked. I mean, this stuff has to stop. One thing I did when I took over the NRC a year and a half ago is I went to the Federal Election Commission and said, could our candidates and our senators use their campaign dollars to pay for security? Because, as you know, House and Senate members don't have security, most of them outside of D.C. But a lot of it is we've got to say, we can have a heated conversation about the issues, but this violence has got to stop. This is horrible, and my heart goes out to Paul Pelosi, and I hope he has a full recovery.
We've learned that the suspect's social media shows that he embraced conspiracy theories about the 2020 election on January 6th. I want you to listen to what President Biden said yesterday.
It's one thing to condemn the violence, but you can't condemn the violence unless you condemn those people who continue to argue the election was not real, that is being stolen, that all the malarkey that's being put out there to undermine democracy.
Is he right? Should Republicans do more to reject conspiracy theories and dangerous rhetoric?
I think what we have to do is, one, we have to condemn the violence, and then we have to do everything we can to get people, make sure people feel comfortable about these elections. You know, we've got to do everything we can to get people comfortable that this election in 9 days is going to be free and fair, that people's votes are all going to be counted fairly, they're not going to be diluted. And so that's one thing I've tried to do at the NRSC, is get people to make sure we're ready. I tell people, go to the polls, vote, go to the polls and be poll watchers, so you can see that these elections are going to be fair. And we've got to work on it every cycle, get it better every cycle.
To be fair, Senator, most of your Republican colleagues, even those in the Trump White House, said that the 2020 election was free and fair, and that has not stopped the conspiracies from flying. So is it important for people from the top of your party, the former president on down, to tone down the rhetoric about the conspiracy, instigate somebody who is unhinged, like the man who went into the Pelosi home?
Dan, I think what's important is everybody do everything we can to make these elections fair. We've got Hillary Clinton saying the 24 election is going to be stolen. We've got Stacey Abrams saying she didn't lose. You know, so my job is do everything I can to get people to feel comfortable these elections are fair. And I'm telling people, get out to vote, go be a poll watcher, and when we have the opportunity, let's make our election laws safer. Let's make sure that you have voter ID, you don't have ballot harvesting, you have monitored ballot box. That makes people feel more comfortable that the elections are going to be fair.
Okay, and just to be clear, I want to move on, but there's no evidence that they weren't fair in 2020. I do want to move on to something that's happened in your home state of Florida, which is reporting that there were anti-Semitic displays around yesterday.
And if you want to see the whole questioning about the anti-Semitic displays, there's a link down in the video description to the full program, CNN State of the Union, just like I put a link to all my sources under the sources heading after I put a brief summary of all the clips I'm using. That's all in the video description if you click on that. But that's the last clip on my main topic about how this attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, is a symptom of the increasing political violence and threats coming from the Republican Party and their rhetoric. But before I leave the whole Monday media mix-up, especially about the issues on the upcoming midterms, I want to show you a couple more clips. One is on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. Martha Raddatz talking to Dr. Jen Ashton about the abortion issue, which is possibly like the sleeper issue that is really going to change the outcome. And if you're looking for a sleeper issue that's going to change the outcome, well, my final clip will be from NBC News' Meet the Press, Chuck Todd talking about their data download, about the one thing that could, help Democrats from what looks like a red wave, red tsunami that has been now kind of mitigated by the election denialism, the threat to democracy from the Republicans, and then the abortion issue that I'm about to talk about. But even more than threat to democracy and abortion would be like unexpected turnout of young voters. That's the final clip I'm going to show. But first, here's ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, host Martha Raddatz, and Dr. Jen Ashton talking about how there's been already a real impact from the terrible Republican-based policies taking away women's right to control their own bodies and their own reproductive choices, that I'll talk about a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
I do support codification of Roe versus Wade. I also recognize that abortion should not be without limitation.
People expect their government to protect their rights to their own bodies.
I want women, doctors, local political leaders, letting the democracy that's always allowed our nation to thrive, to put the best ideas forward.
The government should not be making this decision for her.
Abortion is on the ballot this November as both parties count on this divisive issue motivating voters to get out to the polls next week. And according to our new ABC Ipsos poll this morning, it ranks third among the issues voters care about most, behind the economy and inflation. Chief Medical Correspondent Dr. Jen Ashton joins us with a report on how the Supreme Court's Dobbs rulings overturning Roe has changed the lives of providers and patients. And good morning to you,
Good
Jen.
morning, Martha. And it certainly has changed that. The day Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court, many pregnant women in this country woke up to far fewer choices, and their doctors are now having to help them navigate the care they get across the country.
We knew from the second it happened that our lives, the way that we provided medical care, were going to change, and that our patients were going to be so much more desperate.
Since the Supreme Court's Dobbs abortion decision, at least 14 states have ceased nearly all abortion services, leaving patients to travel to one of 24 states, which allow abortion up to 22 weeks or beyond. While the U.S. has been dealing with a maternal mortality crisis for years, the impact of abortion becoming illegal in some states was felt instantaneously by doctors who take care of women at places like Planned Parenthood in California. How quickly after that decision was announced did you start to see things change?
When Roe versus Wade was overturned last summer, we saw an additional 200% increase in patients coming from out of state.
In Texas, where nearly all abortions are illegal, this Planned Parenthood clinic is still trying to help patients as best they can.
We're providing all the other care that we've always provided: access to contraception, STI testing and treatment, breast and cervical cancer screenings. All of those things are still available, and there's actually more of a demand for those services given the landscape that people are navigating.
And timing can make the difference between life and death for a woman with an undesired pregnancy who is seeking termination.
A lot of people have irregular menstrual cycles, and so they just don't know when they got pregnant. And of course, every week that goes by, it becomes more expensive, more challenging. And across the country, we're seeing that abortion providers in states where abortion remains legal are being overwhelmed by the influx of patients from out of state.
And the emotional or psychological toll on these women and their doctors is significant. What is it like for you in your experience? And are there times where, you know, you run through a gamut of emotions yourself?
Abortion is just one type of healthcare, and I provide a lot of types of healthcare. And so what I would say is that it's not medical care or providing medical care that takes a toll on me. It's working within a system that provides for neither health care, nor is it actually a system. It's the structural challenges that weigh on me the most.
And now, something that was previously inconceivable, a legal or criminal threat to doctors who treat women in states where abortion is illegal. Can you fathom what it would be like to risk criminal and legal consequences for doing your job as a physician?
No, it's so challenging. I mean, imagine being a doctor and having before you a patient with an ectopic pregnancy, and you're not even sure if you can provide a life-saving medical treatment. You're literally choosing between saving the life of your patient and going to jail.
And Martha, it is not just doctors taking these risks, it's patients too, traveling out of state, much more than an inconvenience for these women. It is putting them at higher risk medically, not to mention the mental and financial burden this additional transportation is taking on them. It is significant.
It is indeed significant. And Jen, as you know, we've got this new data this.
So yeah, that is definitely one of the wild cards for the midterm elections coming up a week from tomorrow. If you've been watching my live stream for the last several months, you know, like in the spring, it looked like it was going to be a Republican red wave because, that's what historically happens when their midterm elections usually go against the president in power, especially if that same party controls the Congress. So Democrats control the presidency, the House, and the Senate very weakly, of course, like just by a few votes in the House and like 50-50 in the Senate, with Kamala Harris breaking the tie. But even that control, in the midterms, generally presidents don't do that well. There are a few exceptions, but then in the summer, after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade and the Dobbs decision, there was some indications that there was going to be a backlash, and that's kind of what that last clip was talking about. All the women who realized that Republicans have taken away one of their fundamental rights to control their own bodies and their reproductive choices. That might bring out a lot of voters. But then in the last couple weeks, especially after the latest inflation numbers came out a couple weeks ago that showed that there was no lowering of inflation in the last measure before the midterm elections. So Biden is probably going to get pretty hammered on the inflation number, although then last week the GDP, the economic growth number, came out and showed that the economy was actually growing stronger than expected, like 2.6% in the third quarter. So I don't know how all that economic data is going to play out, and I don't know whether the abortion issue is going to get a lot of women out, and men who also believe that women should be able to control their own bodies. But one of the big deciders as to whether the Democrats are going to be able to hold the Senate and maybe even the House of Representatives is how many young voters, like the Gen Z and millennial voters, come out. And that was actually the subject of the NBC News Meet the Press data download that I want to finish up the program with as the final clip for my Monday Media Mix-Up today. Over here.
We are back. Data download time. So if Democrats want to defy the usual pattern of midterms this election, they're going to need some parts of the electorate to exceed turnout expectations. And the group at the top of their wish list to show up in droves? Young voters. Let me show you why. When you look at our most recent poll, there was only one age group that Democrats were leading on when it came to which party should control Congress. Voters under 35. And look at that advantage. It's a 30-point advantage. That's pretty good if young voters show up. And the pattern when it comes to midterm elections is not great when it comes to young voters. As you can see, first of all, young voters in general usually are below the national average of turnout, even in presidential. But it hits the 40s. Twice it's hit 50, once with Barack Obama's first election, and of course the most recent one during Donald Trump's attempt at winning re-election. And as you can see in the midterms, it usually goes down in half. The one exception, 2018, had a pretty high youth turnout. And guess what happened? Democrats did pretty well in that midterm election. Well, let's take a look at what the interest in the election has been this year when it comes to young voters. It's been sitting at 42%. The good news for Democrats, that's much better than what young voter interest was in 2014 when Democrats got wiped out in those midterms. But it is not yet at 2018 levels, which is why Democrats look like they're poised to lose the House, not hold it. Now, when you look at the growing interest in this election season, it has grown for voters under 35. Before October, it was 35%. It went up 7 points to 42% in our most recent poll. But look at that compared to all voters. It was at 59% pre-October, and the high-interest voters are now hitting 70%. The fact of the matter is, Democrats, they don't need young voters to hit 70, but they definitely need young voters to hit 50 if they have any shot at holding the House. Before we go to break, this week we wrapped up Season 5.
So there you see NBC News' Meet the Press pointing out one of the things they could change the outcome of the midterm elections from what you're seeing in the polls? Because that's one of the things about polls, is that they're based on who are the likely voters in past elections. And if, like, young voters come out at higher levels than they have in the past, the Gen Z millennial voters that Chuck Todd was just talking about, that could totally change the outcome. And that's, you have to wait till the elections are over to figure out who voted and what the results are. I mean, it could be Republicans taking the House and the Senate. It could be Democrats keeping the House and the Senate. And, that's what makes it such a worthwhile event to speculate about and watch. And I've been talking about whether I'm going to continue doing these live streams past the midterms as such a hugely important event. And I've already said I'm going to finish through 2022, and I think I may even go through 2024. I'll talk about that more during the next couple months, but I appreciate all of you who showed up for this live stream. I especially appreciate my super chat contribution that Matthew provided me at the beginning of the program. Thank you for that, Matthew, one of my #1 fans. If you want to support this live stream, well, of course, you can give me a thumbs up. You can subscribe to the channel. Right below the video, you can see links to become a monthly patron on Patreon or a one-time financial contributor through PayPal. At the $5 and $10 level, I give you a ACLU Constitution, as well as this #LiberalViewer weatherproof vinyl sticker. If you're interested in any of that, just click on one of the links below the video. One thing I also wanted to point out, Elon Musk took over Twitter this weekend, and with this whole attack on Paul Pelosi issue, he tweeted something that was totally ridiculous. Here, I knew he was going to delete this tweet. That's why I saved my own copy of it. Hillary Clinton was tweeting about the Republican Party and its mouthpieces now regularly spread hate and deranged conspiracy theories. It is shocking but not surprising that violence is the result. As citizens, we must hold them accountable for their words and the actions that follow. So that's what Hillary Clinton said. And then you can see Elon Musk replied, "There is a tiny possibility that there might be more to this story than meets the eye." And then he included a link to the Santa Barbara Observer, which is this totally bogus, non-news, non-journalistic account that has mentioned a whole bunch of false stories over the years and was claiming that this is Paul Pelosi is gay, and this is some result of him having some tryst with someone in his house that went bad, and it doesn't even match any of the facts. The break-in, the hammer breaking the glass, and now there are even more facts to dispute that. So Elon Musk taking over Twitter is not looking good based on that tweet that he removed himself. And anyway, I just wanted to point that out before I finish the program. And thank you all for joining me. Thank you to Matthew for the super chat contribution. I noticed this live stream got demonetized because I talked about conspiracy theories, or I don't know why. But if you're watching this as a recorded show, you might consider becoming a patron of mine on Patreon. I think I'm going to be doing this live stream for a couple more years, and I need more patron supporters. So click on that link. $5 a month, that's the key level. If you have to do $1, if you can do $10, if you can't afford to support my live stream, I totally understand. So anyway, that's what I wanted to finish with, and thank you all for joining me. For the Dash and Sandy fans out there, my dead dog Sandy and my dead cat Dash, we are going to be scheduling some new flooring. Oh, thank you, Tom Trask, for that super chat contribution at the end. I was just going to say we're going to fix our flooring probably in December, and we then will have the possibility of getting a new kitten to replace Dash and Sandy. Well, no one could ever replace Dash. No one can ever replace Sandy, but maybe I can end my shows with a new kitten clip after that's all worked out in December. Anyway, that's the end of the show. Thank you all for joining me. I will be back. We'll be back next Monday, the day before the November 8th election, to give you my last pre-midterm live stream. Until then, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.